It's the first week of June, so this is our monthly news and analysis episode, where we talk about what's happening with the Disney company and what it means as we move forward. In our last two monthly news episodes, we have focused on large problems faced by Disney CEO Bob Chapek in Florida. But on this episode, we have three segments. We'll look at what's coming to the Disney parks in California and Florida in the years ahead, as well as how new offerings over at Universal Orlando are arranged to place substantial pressure on the Disney resort. We'll update our ongoing story about the Reedy Creek Improvement District and what it likely means for the Florida resort in the years ahead. And lastly, COVID restrictions are again coming back to some areas of California, and how that, along with a range of other concerns, is creating unique problems for the Disney resort in California and also out in Florida. So today, we will get you up to speed with large issues that concern the Disney studio and the Disney park. But before we jump in, I have some new Bandcamp subscribers that I want to thank. We're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast, and these are the listeners who make all of this possible. Gratitude is going out today to Chad, Dr. Jojo, Eric, Jim, Candy, Josh, Bill, Grands John, Pat, and PanFan53. Thanks to each of you for supporting what we do here. I really appreciate it. And now, here's the show. Let's start here. Last week, we had a three-part episode called Strange Stories at Epcot that included, among other things, a lengthy review of the new Disney coaster Cosmic Rewind. We talked about what it was, how it worked, its unusual design history, and then I ranked it compared to other attractions at the Florida resort. There are over 50 rides at Disney World, and by that I mean actual rides with vehicles that move, not stationary shows and other attractions. The exact number of rides is open for debate because it matters if you include things like rideable vehicles on Main Street and the rafts for Tom Sawyer Island. But I think most any definition would get you over 50. And in those 50, anything in the top 15 is pretty spectacular. Last week, I placed Cosmic Rewind in the number 7 spot. And then after the episode posted and after spending some more time on the coaster, I think I'd like to adjust up my ranking by 1 spot. I tried to have a holistic approach to ranking these attractions that considered both the grandness of the ride's vision and how well it achieved it. And some attractions on this list are not thrill rides and don't have that visceral sense of wow, but they do have a grand vision and accomplish it at a very high level. I'm thinking specifically of Kilimanjaro Safaris, which geographically is the largest attraction on property by a lot. It's an engaging trip through African-themed environments in which animals are easy to view, and for roughly 15 minutes sustains a continuous illusion of moving through a savanna reserve. Anyway, this was my original list from last week, and you, of course, are free to quibble. But in the first spot, Rise of the Resistance, then Flight of Passage, Kilimanjaro Safaris, Haunted Mansion, Expedition Everest, Soaring Around the World, and then Cosmic Rewind. After spending some more time on Cosmic Rewind, I would move it up by 1 spot, right behind Expedition Everest. Both of these are excellent experiences as coasters with stories presented indoors. Expedition Everest is, in my opinion, a little bit more successful in telling a direct story. With very little setup, the basic narrative on Everest is clear and easy to follow. Also is a story that fits well with a coaster. The story in the queue and pre-show over at Epcot for Cosmic Rewind are straightforward and compelling, but the narrative elements arranged around this new coaster, are a little too complex to follow while moving on a high-speed vehicle. For me, that's the difference between these two rides. But why did I move it up by one spot? The answer is simple. Also, maybe it's helpful for some of you out there. Because I got used to the turning cars. I arrived at the point where I knew their movements, and once I was familiar with how the ride functioned, I had a lot more fun with it. Instead of being turned by the cars, I turned with the cars. There was a certain mechanical choreography, or a type of roller coaster dance that I was now participating in. Also, the rhythm of some songs work far better with the movements of the coaster, allowing you to intuitively sync with the coaster movements. The worst song, I think, in terms of movement sync, is September by Earth, Wind & Fire, in which the beat and also the musical rhythms don't line up very well with the side-to-side movements of the coaster. Also, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears is too slow. The best song in terms of how it pairs with coaster movements is Disco Inferno by the Tramps. It plays at 129 beats per minute, which works out pretty well here. The songs on this coaster are randomized and you never know what you're going to get. And I should point out that there's still a couple that I haven't experienced. And so, around the internet right now are endless clickbait articles talking about how this ride produces motion sickness. Have I seen anyone leave the ride who is visibly experiencing symptoms of motion sickness? I have seen one person who needed to sit down and was attended to briefly by cast members. I've also talked to a couple of people who were mildly queasy, and beyond this, I've talked to people who have had the exact same reaction on Expedition Everest. I think the most unusual element in this new coaster is the individual ride vehicles that rotate as the train cars move forward. They are programmed to rotate slowly to face screens and physical sets inside the ride building in the same way that doom buggies rotate you toward the most interesting visual element in each room. Here's my small piece of advice. If you are perhaps older than 23 and no longer in prime coaster conditioning, the first ride may be a little disorienting. The coaster, with its simultaneous forward and side-to-side action, is moving in a way that is unfamiliar to your body. But if you can get to the point where you anticipate the movements, you might find that it's a little more fun than it was back on your initial ride. But there's something else here that I want to tap into. The construction walls now are down for Cosmic Rewind. Test and adjust is over. The ride is up and running as a finished coaster. Over at the Magic Kingdom, the Tron coaster has been on the track testing, but the structures for the Tron attraction and the area around it, along with some fairly extensive lighting effects, are nowhere near finished. It's possible, I think, that this coaster could open for the winter holidays, but from a marketing standpoint, I'm not sure what the benefit here would be to the resort. Traditional tourists don't typically visit Disney World more than once a year. Cosmic Rewind will still attract tourists come November and December. I think it's more likely that we'll see Tron open early in 2023 to be the driver for tourism next year. But after 2023, the resort has a pretty big problem. The recently renamed World Nature section of Epcot has an outdoor walkthrough attraction, Moana's Journey of Water, moving through construction. This will be a large trail through a deeply landscaped area where guests can interact with colorful exhibits focused on water. It will be situated between the land and the Seas Pavilion, and it will take up a fairly large piece of real estate, but the area that's enclosed for construction right now, behind those massive walls, will also include other things such as Dreamer's Point. From looking over the walls while on the Epcot monorail, it's clear that this area is going to be deeply layered with piping and technology that should create an engaging show and play area, with streams of water reacting to guest movement. But also, this is not the type of attraction around which families will book an entire vacation. It will be the type of attraction that enhances a vacation rather than makes a family book a new trip. I'm guessing that this will be a mid-2023 offering as well. After that, there's the Princess and the Frog retheming of Splash Mountain, arranged both for the Magic Kingdom in Florida and Disneyland in California. This is a project that dates back to at least 2019. But according to the New York Times, Imagineering has been discussing ways to remove the Song of the South characters since 2014. The retheming would replace the Brer Rabbit story with one focused on Tiana, Naveen, and Louis from Princess and the Frog, as they prepare for a Mardi Gras celebration. In terms of the movie timeline, this ride would be set just after the film, with the original voice actors reprising their roles. The retheme was originally announced back in June 2020, and then Disney didn't mention it again for over a year. The following summer, an executive at Disney World confirmed that Disney was still moving forward with this project, though it might be years before designers were finished and a revised attraction was realized. This announcement was accompanied by a video on the Disney Parks blog, where designers talked a lot about how important the reimagined ride would be for the parks, but offered very little in terms of details. At this point, it seemed clear, from various comments and concept art, that the attraction would include multiple animatronics of Tiana and Louis, which would be placed in various show areas as these characters gather together friends for a Mardi Gras celebration. With this, I also expect Disney to redress and reuse many animatronics presently on the attraction, as well as the finale with the riverboat. In California, this attraction has over 100 animatronics, many of them culled from America Sings. In Florida, there's over 60, with a smaller finale show stage. I'm not sure what will happen to those animatronics that were specifically associated with the story of Brer Rabbit. But in both American versions of this ride, these Brer characters comprise a small percentage of the overall figures. Then this past week, something unusual happened. The voice actress for Tiana, Anika Noni Rose, who has been in discussions about her work for the new attraction, let slip on the TV show Live with Kelly and Ryan that this revamped attraction was scheduled to debut in 2024. Now, was this an actual slip, or was it an orchestrated slip designed to capture an audience on the internet? I'm inclined to believe that this one at least was an actual slip, as Disney officially distanced themselves from the statement once it was out there. Disney explained that they would share more information about the attraction, including presumably a timeline, during the Essence Festival of Culture, which will be held in New Orleans from June 30th to July 3rd. But again, this could have been orchestrated as something that is perceived, at least as an unintentional announcement, is reposted faster and wider than official announcements. So let's break this down a little. From a marketing perspective, the date seems right. At the moment, Disney has nothing else moving forward as an attendance driver for 2024 at both Disneyland and Disney World. Disney World, in particular, needs new attractions to fill its 36,000 on-property hotel rooms. And that is a stunning number of rooms to fill year-round. Let me put this in perspective. That is almost the exact same number of hotel rooms in the entire city of San Francisco. And many people who book those rooms will need a unique reason to commit to another Disney vacation. So, from an operations model, 2024 seems like a good year for this attraction to premiere. But from a development and installation model, this doesn't seem like enough time to retheme an attraction as large as Splash Mountain. Imagineering was able to retheme DCA's version of the Tower of Terror to Guardians of the Galaxy in under a year, but that was mostly accomplished with screens and a couple of reasonably small animatronics. With multiple animatronics of Tiana and Louis, plus at least one of Naveen, I'm guessing that we're looking at least 7 new, likely highly articulated figures, if not more, plus the 60 existing figures on the Florida attraction and the 100 figures on the California attraction. Disney likely needs the capacity of Splash Mountain for its winter holidays to help manage and satisfy peak crowds in November and December. I doubt that Disney would close Splash Mountain, particularly in Florida, before the start of 2023. But I do see as a likely scenario that Disney might close Splash Mountain at roughly the same time that it opens the Tron coaster on the other side of the Magic Kingdom. So, from a crowd management standpoint, Splash Mountain might go down for retheming in mid-January 2023, and then the Tron coaster might come online in March for spring break crowds or possibly May to drive summer attendance. But in terms of managing capacity, especially within the Genie Plus system, that type of attraction swap makes a lot of sense to me. And I would also expect during this period that the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train be shifted over to the regular Genie Plus lineup, while the Tron coaster becomes the paid Lightning Lane in the Magic Kingdom, especially during peak periods of visitation. If you're a regular listener here on this podcast, you already know that in the past 2 years, the main campus of Imagineering in Glendale has been stripped down to a remnant of its pre-pandemic ranks. Disney doesn't release employment numbers, but my guess, there's only around 200 to 300 Imagineers still fully employed in Glendale, which is about 20 to 25% of the pre-pandemic crew. Disney does have separate Imagineering teams in Florida and Anaheim attached to the individual resorts, which can help with installation of the figures and the sets. But for a vastly reduced team, the retheming of a major ride is an enormous task to accomplish in such a short time. And so in this, there's some interesting things to watch, particularly how Imagineering is going to manage a large retheme with its current staff levels. A lot of this, I'm guessing, will need to be outsourced to companies like Garner Holt, who's made many but certainly not all animatronics for recent Disney attractions. Holt, for example, created some but not all of the animatronics for attractions such as Radiator Springs Racers and The Little Mermaid Dark Ride. The issue, I think, boils down to this. The marketing team for Disney World needs a major new attraction in 2024, but can the reduced Imagineering team deliver one in such a short period of time? These elements also showcase a larger issue that's looming for Disney in the near future. Across town in Orlando, Disney's main competitor is delivering a new park, Epic Universe, which presently has a tentative opening date of 2025. That's 3 years away. Large attractions at Disney take years. Universe of Energy closed in August 2017. Its replacement, Cosmic Rewind, opened in May 2022. That's nearly 5 years. The Studio Backlot Tour closed in September 2014. Its replacement, Toy Story Land, opened in June 2018. That's nearly 4 years. And Galaxy's Edge in various visions was developed for years and years. But these elements all highlight the big problem in the near future for Disney, that Universal has a lot in development. Epic Universe will have 4 deeply themed lands, something comparable to 4 Pandora's or 4 Cars lands, with at least one major attraction anchoring each area. One area already announced will be Super Mario Land. Rumors surrounding the other 3 lands suggest that they will likely be related to Harry Potter, specifically with a Ministry of Magic attraction, classic monsters likely keying off some elements of the Halloween Horror Nights, and films produced by DreamWorks, specifically How to Train Your Dragon. But again, these last three areas are only rumors. The released concept layout of the park, however, does show 4 individual lands and also multiple coasters. So it will be interesting to see how Disney reacts to this development across town, and also how it manages personnel to create a response. And maybe this is something that you can mull over as you walk through the lovely queue over at Cosmic Rewind sometime, hopefully, later this year. But now, on to our next story. On our last 2 monthly news and analysis episodes, we focused at length on the problems between Disney and the state of Florida, with the state government voting to dissolve the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which oversees the land on which the Disney Resort is built, after Disney criticized what has been termed the Don't Say Gay bill. When we left off in our last episode, a group of citizens from Orange and Osceola counties filed a lawsuit as the dissolution of the district would likely raise taxes for people in those counties. The suit was filed in part as a result of the governor's purported limiting of a company's free speech through the use of a government-imposed penalty. On May 10th, a federal judge dismissed this suit for multiple reasons. The first reason was that those who brought the suit did not have standing and had not yet been damaged, though there remains the possibility that the vote to dissolve the improvement district may be construed as an unlawful attempt to limit free speech. The people who brought this suit, however, hadn't had their First Amendment rights harmed in any way. Beyond this, quote, nothing in the complaint shows the plaintiffs had a close relationship with Disney. Second, the increase in property taxes, which might be between $1,000 to $2,000 per homeowner, was at this time still speculative and not yet an actual damage. And lastly, the judge wrote that she, as a federal judge, did not have jurisdiction over state issues that had not yet been implemented. On May 16th, lawyers for the plaintiffs redirected this lawsuit to the 11th Judicial Circuit Court in Miami-Dade County, believing that this state court would have a stronger jurisdiction over the issue. The revised lawsuit still focused on the Florida Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, essentially that those being taxed should have the ability to participate in the process of taxation, and the underlying structure of the original 1967 Reedy Creek statute. A lawyer representing those residents explained, quote, we truly believe we are on firm footing before the state court. The federal court judge viewed the case more through the prism of the First Amendment argument, which is Disney's to make. Although there is case law, which also gives third parties rights to raise another party's First Amendment rights, we chose not to appeal the federal judge's decision. We believe our Florida taxpayer rights are going to receive greater protection in state court. On that same day that the new suit was filed, May 16th, Governor DeSantis made a statement in which he said the state government, not the counties, would likely take over control of Reedy Creek, even though there is no present mechanism for the state to do that. He explained that, quote, he is working on a proposal that likely will be considered by the legislature after the November elections. And this, I think, is one of the keys to understanding where this is going. As we've explored on previous episodes, without new legislation, the state has no strong options to absorb all of the functions of Reedy Creek, but that 2-page piece of legislation dissolving Reedy Creek was effective in fundraising for DeSantis and other Republicans. The unique structure of Reedy Creek creates a situation whereby the district can tax Disney at a far higher rate than otherwise allowed in Orange and Osceola counties to pay for road work, fire departments, and other services wholly focused on the resort. If the district is dissolved without further legislation, those costs would need to be absorbed by the residents of the two counties through higher property taxes. And even if the special district is dissolved, Disney can move civic operations into the two cities on its property. And the dissolution of a city is far more complicated than the dissolution of a special district. With the governor now specifically pointing to a period after the November elections, he is essentially kicking this can down the road to a point where the outcome can't harm his re-election campaign. Once this mess is all over, I still expect some system very close to the current Reedy Creek arrangement to oversee the Disney property in Florida. But this ongoing dispute has played out poorly for Disney CEO Bob Chapek, who tried to keep Disney out of politics. Bill George, a Harvard business professor, offered this opinion, quote, "I don't think Chapek did his homework. We're in a different world today. He was acting like he was back in the 1990s. In this world of 2022, you have all kinds of stakeholders who expect you to take a position, especially your employees." He then explained that inside the world of business, this episode has served as an example to other CEOs that political and cultural values, essentially explaining what you and your company stand for, would be a central part of most any large company's brand moving forward, and a failure to recognize this would likely produce a similar crisis to what Disney is facing in Florida. A fumble like this can be overcome as a learning experience, especially for a new CEO. But this decision has placed longtime Disney practices in Florida in jeopardy, which might have serious consequences, and more significantly, it's contributed to the continued downward movement of the company's stock. Last September, Disney stock was consistently above $180 per share. For most of May, that is this past month, it was below $110, dipping at one point briefly below $100. In the past 8 months, the stock has lost over 40% of its value. This, more than anything, assuming the stock price doesn't recover over the coming months, will make it difficult for the Disney board to renew Chapek's contract when it ends next February. For the past month, Chapek has been unusually quiet. He's largely been absent from the news cycle, much in the same way that Governor DeSantis has now moved on to other talking points, as though everyone understands that this issue is a mess and that there will be no winners with the dissolution of Reedy Creek, but the governor needs to move to the other side of fall elections before this problem can be solved. So how close are we now to a return to normal? Over the past 5 weeks, many major elements have returned to Disneyland in California, including the Main Street Electrical Parade, the World of Color, and Fantasmic, though Murphy the Dragon is still a wee bit unreliable in producing a blast of fire for each show. But the Florida resort is still struggling to return some areas to their pre-pandemic status. So at the Florida resort, where are those elements still missing? The areas with the largest absences are in live entertainment and the restaurants. The issue with the restaurants is largely a consequence of the job market. At the start of the pandemic, many hourly employees at the resort shifted to other more reliable industries such as healthcare. And now in 2022, Disney, like many companies, is having difficulty filling positions. In the upcoming month, Disney will hold job fairs in Orlando and Tampa. For many positions, particularly those in food service and housekeeping, they are now offering a signing bonus from $1,000 to $3,000. But still, this is not enough to attract a large enough number of new cast members to the resort. A number of upper-level signature restaurants are still completely closed. These include Monsieur Paul and Takumi Thai at Epcot and Victoria and Albert's at the Grand Floridian, but also the Asker House Royal Banquet Hall in the Norway Pavilion, the Restaurant Marrakesh in the Morocco Pavilion, and 1900 Park Fair at the Grand Floridian. And some of those restaurants that have recently reopened are only open on specific days. Jico, the signature restaurant at the Animal Kingdom Lodge, is only open Thursday through Monday. Likewise, Citricos at the Grand Floridian is only open Wednesday through Sunday. And those nights that these restaurants are open, they're only open for 4.5 hours, from 5 p.m. until 9:30. Room service as well, though presently available at the Deluxe and DVC resorts, is less available than it was before the pandemic. Beyond this, nearly every food-related specialty activity, from cake decorating at Amorette's to the afternoon tea at the Garden View Tea Room to Jico's wine tasting, are listed as still temporarily unavailable. And let me add in one more element to the dining-related issues. To account for the continued needed flexibility during a time of COVID, advanced dining reservations now are only available for 60 days out instead of the previous 180 days. In this, the general move of the Florida resort is to limit or temporarily close upper-end signature dining along with specialty services and to focus the available labor on general table service and counter service options. I'd love to see this improve, but there are many factors in the labor market that suggest that though a couple more restaurants may open, this is not going to significantly improve over summer. Presently, there are 11.4 million job openings in America and nowhere near enough people interested in filling them. For most of the spring, there have been 2 available jobs for every 1 person on the job market. Fed Chair Jerome Powell described the level of job openings as, quote, extremely high. The other area where there's still a significant reduction at the Florida resort is in live entertainment. As with the restaurants, this too is a labor-intensive division. Phantasmic, Enchanted Tales with Belle, Voyage of the Little Mermaid, or at least something to put in that theater, cultural representatives at World Showcase and Animal Kingdom Lodge, guides to lead the vast majority of specialty tours that existed before the pandemic, nearly 20 meet and greets, Jedi training, Disney Junior Dance Party, and a lot of small performance groups, including the Pandora Drummers, the Acrobats in the China Pavilion, the Acrobats in the French Pavilion, the Green Army Drummers, and various streetmosphere performers such as Citizens of Hollywood. None of these are back. I should point out that 2 entertainment areas, the Hoop-de-Doo Musical Review and a revised version of Nemo the Musical, will open later this month after an 800-day-plus closure. Live entertainment in the parks typically draws thousands and thousands of guests away from attractions, freeing up space in standby queues. But the reduction of live entertainment creates an unusual burden on centerpiece attractions. On an average day, the parks right now don't look that crowded. But with the lack of live entertainment, the standby queues for many attractions are as long as they would be on a far busier day. This, too, is related to labor availability and cost issues, and is unlikely to change over summer. At this point, I'd say that the next true opportunity for a meaningful change will be in the lead-up to the winter holidays. One direct result of limited labor is the temporary suspension of the annual pass program at Disneyland, which is called the Magic Key program. Earlier, Disneyland had limited the upper tiers, which offered wide availability on weekends and during holidays, but as of May 31st, it paused sales of all Magic Key passes indefinitely, including those lower tiers that only allow admission during non-holiday weekdays. I should point out that many sites are reporting that Disney will still honor renewals for existing Magic Key holders, though Disney itself has not yet made that public announcement. In Florida, nearly all annual passes have been suspended for months, except for a Florida resident pass that allows admission on weekdays. At both of those resorts, this is a significant issue for DVC members, many of whom have purchased timeshare memberships with the expectation that they would be able to use discounted annual passes to access the parks, rather than purchasing full-fare day tickets. In terms of capacity constraints, Those issues will almost surely be resolved more quickly in Florida than in California, as Florida has fewer local residents interested in annual passes and also more capacity. And those purchasing annual passes who live outside of the state tend to act like traditional tourists when visiting the resort, purchasing mini meals on property and staying in hotels. But at the moment, the limited types of admission media are a problem for both resorts, a problem that is in part related to a labor shortage, particularly in food service and live entertainment, which reduces pressure on traditional attractions. But there are other COVID-related concerns that are both lingering and now re-emerging. This past month, I counted people wearing masks while outdoors at both the California and the Florida resorts. These numbers are significantly lower than they were a few months ago. In Florida, about 4% of park guests are voluntarily choosing to wear masks outdoors. In California, it's around 8%. For both resorts, this number is slightly higher indoors. But on both coasts, the one group for which I saw significantly higher mask usage is with cast members, particularly those who work closely with guests, such as cashiers and ride operators who load guests into vehicles. But even outdoors in the park, cast members were wearing masks at a significantly higher level than guests. At this point, in June 2022, like most people, I had hoped that we would be beyond updates related to COVID. But this is going to be an issue that shadows the parks for many months moving forward. The pandemic reorganized the labor market, which continues to cause problems for the Disney resorts, Florida in particular. COVID, beyond this, is not only affecting people's willingness to travel, but also their ability to do so. Over Memorial Day weekend in the U.S., more than 7,000 flights were canceled, displacing close to 1 million travelers, or roughly 20% of those who had flight plans over the holiday. Delta, which had the largest number of cancellations, cited, among other things, quote, short staffing and an increase in COVID-19 cases among employees. Essentially, flight crews calling in sick with COVID, which then grounded flights. Beyond issues with domestic air travel, foreign air travel is still significantly down. All non-U.S. citizens traveling to the U.S., with very few exceptions, need to show proof of vaccination and a negative test before traveling. This, along with the long-range unpredictability of COVID waves, has depressed foreign travel to the U.S. and, by extension, travel to the Disney resorts. And this leads to some larger issues that are just on the verge of developing. From April 1st up to June 1st, the 7-day average for new cases in the U.S. rose from 25,000 to 100,000, a four-fold increase. The multiplier was slightly higher in both California and Florida. In California, over the same period, infections rose 5-fold, in Florida 6-fold. But during the same period in the U.S., the hospitalization rate only doubled, suggesting that this current strand, though highly infectious, is less likely to produce a severe illness. This also, to some extent, is attributed to reliable therapeutics and vaccines. In Florida, at the moment, I don't see any significant changes to public space such as at theme parks. But in California, the trend is moving toward more health requirements. California has 2 public university systems, the UC and the CSU. Most of the CSU campuses, as they are on semesters, are already out for the summer. Most of the UC schools, as they are on quarters, won't end their year until mid-June. The one CSU campus on quarters and still in session, along with multiple UC schools, such as UCSB and UCLA, over the past week, reinstituted an indoor mask requirement. Beyond this, some public school systems, such as the ones in Berkeley and Sacramento, have implemented a similar indoor mask requirement. Some counties, such as Alameda County, home to the City of Oakland, also put in place another indoor mask requirement for public buildings, businesses, and other indoor areas. Officials in LA County have said that indoor mask policies are again on the table if case rates don't improve by the end of the month. Mask requirements, if reinstated, will almost surely affect Universal Studios Hollywood, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and the Disney Studio before they affect the Disneyland Resort, which is in Orange County and historically has been more resistant to health limitations than LA County. But health limitations are presently gathering at the peripheries in California, suggesting that this summer may not be as smooth as we all had hoped. In terms of attractions at the Disney parks, except for live shows, most everything is now back in place. You can look down those long lists of attractions and see that everything is open and running. In California, you can even find nearly all of the live shows, parades, and large nighttime spectaculars back on the roster. But issues stemming from COVID, particularly as they relate to the ease of travel and labor shortages, are simply going to shadow the resorts for many months moving forward. In a way, most areas at the resorts are as they were before the pandemic. But in certain key areas, such as live entertainment, a full range of restaurants and menu items, various amenities such as daily housekeeping at the hotels, and specialty events such as tours, the resorts are unlikely to be back to normal in every way at this point until next winter, and maybe even a little longer. And that is generally where things are right now, with a realistic overview of the coming months. There's a lot of good things out there, but not everything is as it was 3 years ago. I'll be back next week with a new episode. At least right now, the plan is to take a look at some compelling and unusual ideas that Walt explored for an updated version of Fantasia, plans that coincidentally relate to some design elements considered for and arranged into Cosmic Rewind. So next week will mostly be in the 1940s, but also in 2022, with an episode about film, which is also about the parks. As you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. Without subscribers, we would simply cease to exist. We do just two things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney Studio and parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney Company. If you enjoy these episodes, please support our efforts by becoming a monthly Bandcamp subscriber. Over on Bandcamp, you'll find dozens and dozens of extra episodes. But the best reason to subscribe is to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can subscribe at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. Until next time, this is Todd James Pierce.